I never thought I'd wake up to find complete strangers setting up white chairs and floral arches in my backyard. Yet there I was, standing at my kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, staring at a small army of caterers, florists, and event staff, running around like they owned the place. At first, I thought maybe they had the wrong address, some weird mix-up. But when I stepped outside to ask what the hell was going on, a smug woman in a headset barely glanced at me before barking orders at a crew hauling in giant speakers. Then I spotted the sign. "Congratulations, Emily and Brian." A full wedding, scheduled for today, at my house, and I hadn't invited a soul. Before I could process it, I noticed our neighborhood's pride and terror, the HOA president herself, standing by the driveway with her clipboard, greeting the arriving guests as if this was her personal palace. That I couldn't believe it. The HOA, who once fined me for having my garbage bins out an extra day, had literally rented out my property for a wedding, without asking, and that's when I decided they messed with the wrong homeowner. Let me back up a bit. My name's Greg, and about 3 years ago, I bought what I thought was my dream house, a nice 3-bedroom place with a big backyard in a quiet neighborhood. It had the perfect old oak tree, a fence for privacy, and enough space for my dogs to run around. But there was one thing I didn't pay enough attention to when I signed the papers: the dreaded homeowners association. It sounded harmless at first. They said they'd keep the neighborhood neat and uniform. What they really meant was they'd micromanage every blade of grass on my lawn. First, they fined me for having a garden hose coiled up in plain sight. Then, I got a notice for my trash cans being visible from the street. Once, I left my Christmas lights up until January 3rd. You'd think I'd committed a federal crime the way they wrote that violation. Still, I tried to get along. I paid my dues, showed up for meetings when I could stomach it, and mostly kept my head down. Our HOA president, Denise, loved to throw her weight around. Retired, bored, and desperate for power, Denise spent her days roaming the neighborhood with her clipboard, documenting every infraction she could find. I learned to ignore her petty complaints. I figured, it's annoying, but how bad can it get? Famous last words. Because when you give a petty tyrant an inch, they'll steal your entire backyard for a wedding. Back to that morning. I stood in my backyard in my pajamas, surrounded by strangers who were setting up folding chairs and stringing up fairy lights on my fence. One of them had the audacity to ask me to move my garden tools so they don't ruin the photos. I demanded to know who was in charge. That's when I spotted Denise, wearing a pastel suit and pearls, acting like she owned the place. I stormed over to her and asked what in the world was happening. She didn't even look fazed. She smiled at me like I was a confused child. "Greg, dear, don't worry. We just needed a little extra space for Emily's big day. Your backyard was the perfect solution." I couldn't believe my ears. Emily, apparently, was Denise's niece. She was getting married that afternoon, and Denise had decided, all on her own, that my house would be the perfect venue. I asked, "Did you forget to tell me about this little plan?" Denise waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, you weren't home when we made the arrangements. But don't worry, Greg. We'll clean everything up afterward. You'll hardly notice we were here." I looked around. There were tables, caterers rolling in carts of food, a DJ setting up massive speakers. Guests were arriving, parking in my driveway and on my lawn. A kid tripped over my flower bed and crushed half my tulips. I demanded everyone leave immediately. Denise just laughed. "Greg, don't be difficult. Think of the community. Emily's wedding is very important for our neighborhood's reputation. Besides, you've got such a nice yard. Why not share?" At that point, I realized these people weren't leaving. Denise had promised her niece a dream backyard wedding, and I was the only thing standing in the way. I called the police. But guess what? They showed up and said it was a civil matter. They told me to take it up with the HOA's lawyer. Meanwhile, the wedding planner was now directing people where to sit. On my patio furniture, I felt my blood pressure hitting new records. I tried to reason with the bride's family. They shrugged and said, "Denise said it was fine." And there it was, my beautiful backyard hijacked by entitled strangers in pastel dresses and rented tuxedos. They really thought they could bulldoze me into letting it happen. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. I tried, one last time, to stop this madness peacefully. I followed Denise back to her car, where she was checking her clipboard, like a general on a battlefield. "Denise," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, This is trespassing. You didn't get my permission. You can't just use my private property for an event." She didn't even flinch. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Greg, you signed the HOA bylaws when you moved in. We have broad discretion over community spaces." I nearly choked. Community spaces? This is my private backyard. Denise gave me this smug grin that made my skin crawl. "Well, the fence line technically extends into the easement, and under the bylaws, the HOA can use communal easements for community benefit. Don't worry, you'll get a nice thank you in the newsletter." A newsletter? That was her grant. Compensation for hosting 100 strangers? I told her I'd sue. She rolled her eyes. "By all means. You'll lose. Our lawyer is excellent." That's when it clicked. Denise didn't think I'd fight back. She thought I was just some pushover. Neighbor who'd grumble, but accept it. She didn't realize that I don't mind being petty when I'm pushed to FAR.so. I asked her, point blank, "If you're so sure you're right, put it in writing." She did. She smugly handed me a copy of her temporary usage permit. Something she typed up herself, citing obscure HOA clauses that didn't even apply. It was nonsense, but she felt invincible. I took the paper, smiled, and said, "Thanks, Denise. This will help a lot." She looked confused. "Help with what?" "You'll see," I said. Then I went inside, locked my door behind me, and called my lawyer, my contractor, and, most importantly, my buddy who runs a demolition crew. That if Denise wanted to play legal games, fine. Two can play that game. And I was about to play it. Loud, messy, and completely within my rights. For the next few hours, I sat inside my house watching the circus unfold in my backyard. I heard the DJ doing a sound check while guests milled about on my lawn, sipping mimosas. Every time I looked outside, I felt my blood boil. The HOA board members wandered around like they were at a country club. A kid dumped a soda on my deck. Furniture. Someone asked if they could use my bathroom. I locked every door and window tight. The police wouldn't help. Denise smugly reminded me she had written authorization. My lawyer confirmed it was total nonsense, but said we'd have to fight it in court after the fact. Meanwhile, the wedding was happening today. I wanted to scream. But then I remembered something. I'd been planning to renovate my backyard for months. I'd already pulled permits for major landscaping and hardscaping work, including tearing up the deck and regrading part of the yard. That I hadn't scheduled the work yet. But there's no law that says I can't start a home improvement project on my own property whenever I want, so I made the call. My buddy Steve answered on the first ring. "You still want that old deck?" "Gone?" he asked. "Today," I said. "Right now?" He laughed. "You're kidding." "Do I sound like I'm kidding, Steve?" He paused. "This is going to be a mess." "I'm counting on it." Steve and his crew rolled up about an hour later. They parked their trucks right in front of the DJ's van, blocking the driveway. The look on Denise's face when she saw the excavator roll off the trailer was worth every HOA fine I'd ever paid. That I walked out to greet Steve. We shook hands like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Where do you want us to start?" he asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. That I looked right at Denise and the bride's mother, who was mid-photo shoot on my deck. "Start with the deck. Tear it up completely. Then we'll move on to the fence line. Oh, and the big tree stump. Pull that too." Denise ran over, sputtering. "Greg, what are you doing?" "There's a wedding happening." I shrugged. "On my property, which I'm renovating. Totally legal. You can't stop me." She threatened to sue. I pointed to her ridiculous permit. "Your paper says you can use the yard." "It doesn't. Say I can't do construction on my own property." By now, Steve's crew was hauling lumber, cranking up saws, and hammering away at my deck. Sawdust flew through the air. The DJ tried to drown them out, failed miserably. Guests stood around, horrified, clutching plates of hors d'oeuvres while the sweet sound of demolition drowned out the wedding march. Denise screamed at me to stop. I smiled, took a sip of my coffee, and said, "Sorry, Denise. You wanted me to share my yard. Hope you like the upgrades." The wedding ceremony limped along, but nobody could hear the vows over the roar of chainsaws and the beeping of the excavator. When Steve's guy started pulling up the fence posts, that's when the bride finally lost it. She screamed at her aunt. That's right, Denise, demanding to know why her dream wedding was turning into a construction zone. I just stood there, arms crossed, watching the circus I never asked for implode right in front of me. The guests scattered. The caterers started packing up early. Half the wedding party left before the cake was even cut, Denise tried one last time to order my crew to stop. Steve, bless him, handed her my signed permit and said, "Ma'am, this is all legal. Maybe next time ask the homeowner first." By sunset, my backyard was a mess of dirt piles, broken deck planks, and the shattered remains of Denise's big day. And you know what? It was beautiful. In the end, Denise and the HOA tried to sue, but their permit didn't hold up in court. Instead, I sued them for trespassing, damages, and emotional distress, and I won. Denise was removed from the board. The HOA had to pay for my backyard renovations, plus my legal fees. And I got a brand new deck on their dime.so next time your HOA thinks they own you. Remind them who really holds the deed.o. And Denise? She moved out 6 months later. Guess she needed a new backyard to ruin. Good riddance.